It appears that there is more and more fire and smoke enveloping the very top of the building, and as fire crews are descending on this area, it does not appear that there's any kind of an effort up there yet. Now remember, oh my God.
Oh my God.
That looks like a second plane.
I did not see a plane go in. That just exploded.
We just saw another plane coming in from the side.
You did. That was out of
yes, and that's the second explosion. You could see the plane.
Ever since we saw this happen, our nation morphed and cynicalized our view of the religion of Islam, a religion that, when interpreted correctly, forms some of the most peaceful individuals in the world. However, we don't see that because we affiliate Muslims with terrorism, and therefore choose not to interact with them. Radical Muslims, the ones you see holding RPGs on the news, decided to take action into their own hands, and decided to make America and the Western world pay. But what does the Western world have to pay for? Why is the US being targeted by these terrorist groups? The answer to that question is immensely complicated, one that a 3-hour video on the topic would only scratch the surface of the entire story behind this relationship.
But one of the reasons linked to this animosity between the two sides starts at the root of the differences between the Western world and the terrorists. Religion. A small piece of land off the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, known as Israel and Palestine, holds a bitter conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. How did this conflict originate?
It is such an age-old issue that, of course, dates back to biblical days and the historic and biblical lands of Judea and Samaria, but we don't need to go back that far. Over the last century, there's been constant tension and turmoil in terms of claims with respect to which land belongs to whom.
Today, in one of the most sacred cities in the world, Jerusalem, a target for the first time in this battle. A rocket fell 10 miles short. No one was hurt. In Tel Aviv, Israelis ran for cover. In all, more than 550 rockets have now been launched at Israel, leaving 3 dead. The military says a third have been intercepted by Israel's famed Iron Dome anti-missile system. Today, we saw where those rockets are coming from. Clouds of smoke revealed a militant rocket launching site.
At least 19 Palestinians were killed in the Israeli air offensive. The operation was met by Gaza militants, even more fierce rocket attacks towards Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Thursday said Israel would do whatever to defend itself against attacks from the Gaza Strip.
After the world wars that ravaged Europe and the Holocaust that decimated the Jewish population, the powers of the world pitied the Jewish people. The Zionist movement that grew out of the world wars called all Jews to come back to their homeland and end in the diaspora. Eventually, there were enough Jewish people in the area and enough backing from the powers, especially the United States, to create the nation of Israel. There was only one problem. Palestinians were currently occupying the area. Israel began using military force to expand onto Palestinian territory. This created tension and violent resistance. From the Jewish point of view, they are simply taking back land that is rightfully theirs, both historically and granted by the UN. For the Palestinians, however, the Jewish people are invading that land that they have settled in for centuries. Not only are the Jewish taking land away from the rightful owners, they are also discriminating against the Palestinian citizens living there. The Jewish people fire back, claiming that God gave them this land, so they should have the right to govern it.
It's estimated that as many as 700,000 Palestinians, self-identified Palestinians, left in 1948 time period, either voluntarily fled or were displaced by virtue of the actions taken by Britain and by the United Nations. So there still is a tremendous amount of hostility and belief that land is land that they are entitled to.
That siren going off means there's a missile headed here into the area we're at. You're looking at the Iron Dome battery. This is the missile defense system that the Israelis have put in, and right now it is tracking the missile coming out of Gaza. Another missile away right there from the Iron Dome. Each one of those interceptors is headed towards one of the some 200 missiles that have come out of Gaza here. So far, 200 rockets flying out of Gaza into various parts of southern Israel.
Since Israel has been recognized as a state, wars have been fought over the land between Israelis and Palestinians. Many have died, and Palestinians have lost their land, jobs, and most importantly, their human rights. The reasons behind the mess essentially boils down to a conflict over entitlement of the land. An intensely heated rivalry that goes back thousands of years, and the political instability coupled with foreign investments, mainly from the United States.
Why does the U.S. continue to support Israel? Does the government feel obligated to protect the Jewish people, or are there more complex reasons?
You have two parts of this overall designation that are currently stated as Palestinian territories. One on the Mediterranean is the Gaza, so-called Gaza Strip, and the other is the so-called West Bank. And you've heard, I'm sure, a lot about both of them. The West Bank sounds like a very strange name because it's on the east side of Israel, but it's the West Bank of the Jordan River, with Jordan on the other side, and actually was Jordanian territory at one point. This area in Gaza since 2006 has been under the political control of an organization you've probably heard of called Hamas. And Hamas is listed on many international terrorist lists as a terrorist organization. Their leaders have kind of repeatedly talked about wanting the destruction of the current state of Israel. They're very, very militant leadership.
The United States was one of the first countries that pitied the Jewish people after World War II. In 1948, President Harry S. Truman recognized Israel as its own state. Since then, the United States has given military aid to the Israelis. However, pity is not the only reason the U.S. continues to support Israel. The U.S. sees Israel as a stepping stone in the Middle East, using it to reach across Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and beyond. The Middle East contains large deposits of oil, a valuable export that the United States desperately needs. Oil is a bit cheaper to import if you have a friend in the business. The U.S. is also interested in the geographical location of Israel, with it being on the east coast of the Mediterranean Sea, a major trade port in the world.
Perhaps one of the main benefits of this relationship is the mutual security. Not only does the U.S. defend Israel from extremist groups in the Middle East, but they also deter violence between Iran and Israel. Israel desperately desires protection against Iran, who continues to seek the destruction of the nation of Israel. Iran trying to construct nuclear weapons gives Israel something to worry about. Having an ally that has as much nuclear power as the United States helps give a sense of security to a nation like Israel, who has no nuclear weapons. In turn, the U.S. uses Israel as a gateway to the Middle East countries that house many extremist terrorist groups that target the United States.
Do the civilians see any end in sight to this? And is there a peaceful solution that they believe can be done?
The solution that was that everyone hoped would take hold in the early 90s from what was called the Oslo Accords was basically the land for peace deal. Basically, we will agree that the West Bank and Gaza will become principally, the state of Palestine, and in exchange for, safety and security measures that would make everybody reasonably happy. It was thought that that was a done deal until the head of the Palestine Liberation Organization, Yasser Arafat, at the last minute pulled back and didn't accept the deal that was on the table.
But how does it affect our community? From a national standpoint, you could make the argument that the Boston bombings may have been instigated by the U.S. involvement in Israel. People continue to fear what might happen next if we continue to back Israel, not only from a terrorist point of view, but from a nuclear one as well. Iran and Israel have been at crossroads recently, and Iranians have threatened nuclear weapons. Certainly the last thing anyone wants is a potential war, and if that becomes the case, the U.S. would have to get involved, obviously changing how we live here.
How can we raise awareness for this in St. Louis and in general?
I think good, constructive dialogue by those who have a good grasp of the facts, those who are willing to sit and talk deliberatively, who's I'll speak on the Jewish side. I think on the Jewish and Israeli side, there are an awful lot of people in St. Louis who believe that as long as Israel, can continue, as a Jewish state, there is strong safety and security, and there is respect for and protection of Palestinians and their needs. There are a lot of people who feel like that. I think there are an awful lot of folks who are sensitive to the Palestinian cause who believe that as well.
From a St. Louis perspective, there are many ways it affects the community. Boeing recently earned a $65 million contract for building munitions for the Israeli Air Force, economically benefiting the city of St. Louis. The Doisy Research Lab at St. Louis University is considered a major terrorist target due to its standing as a center for bioterrorism and its potential supply of smallpox. If the bioterrorist weapons they hold get into the wrong hands, a serious crisis occurs in the city.
There are ways, however, to end this horrible conflict that has encouraged violence and hatred for the enemy. There are numerous foundations built to help those in Israel living in horrid conditions and willing to voice their opinion on the matter. Organizations like the Jewish Voice for Peace accept donations and raise awareness of the conflict and try to end it, as do organizations like the St. Louis Palestine Solidarity Committee and End the Occupation. There are many ways that you can help too. Educating both yourself and others who are ignorant of the matter can help raise awareness of the problem and voice your opinion. The U.S. needs to stop government funding of the Israeli military and focus more on peace negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians. With your help, perhaps the conflict can end, and peace may become a possibility.
And I ask you to consider 3 points. First, peace is necessary. I believe that. I believe that peace is the only path to true security.
Trying to build a dialogue and a platform where people can and are willing to listen to each other, even to the extent where they agree to disagree and say, these are things that we may never get our hands around together. Are there core values that we can talk about and agree upon? And most importantly, for heaven's sake, can we make sure that it doesn't affect our ability to continue to dialogue with each other?
So the real question is, who's fighting for the right cause? As Americans, we like to think that we are always fighting for good, for justice, and for liberty. And that's exactly what the politicians want us to think. The truth is, no one's fighting for the good fight. It is wrong for Palestinians to attack the Jewish community of Israel over a piece of land. However, it is no more justified to retaliate with an equally aggressive force. Our own ethnocentrism prevents us from understanding how complex the situation actually is. We're not saying our perspective as Americans is wrong. We just need to see the whole picture before we form conclusions.